if I can hold it still, it would help if I had two thumbs, but that was settled long ago. Somebody asked me one time how to cut my thumb off. I said, which time? I don't think my inletting is any worse for wear with that bracket being on there. All I did was borrow that hole right there for a little bit and put some spacers in there, so I think we're okay on that. I've cut some wedges, some little form-fitted wedges that I'm going to support this thing with while I run it over the bandsaw, because there are just some things, it's a one-shot deal, there are no do-overs. And if you count on a do-over in some things, you're going to get your feelings hurt. So I'm just going to stick a little piece of tape on here. I can get the tape residue off later. I'm helping a friend of mine do some forming on his house. He's building his own house. He actually has a YouTube channel called I think it's called the Tennessee Frugal Carpenter. He's bought a sawmill, cut his own logs. He's milled his own lumber. He's been working on it now for about a year, and he is he's in the process of forming a wall, his foundation wall for an outbuilding. He's going to build an outbuilding first to store lumber and store tools in. Instead of laying block, he's forming it, and I'm helping him form his walls yesterday. And he's a good carpenter, and carpentry is all I've ever done all my life as well. So we both know when it comes to forming concrete, you better get it right the first time, because do-overs are rare in concrete. When it blows, it blows. I cut me some little blocks that'll go in here under this tape and flatten this, where I can lay this thing down flat on my bandsaw table and it won't rock. Because when bandsaws, when that blade hits that and it starts rocking, it grabs, and it ain't pretty. The next thing I'm going to do is, because this is wider here than back here, I have figured just a swag, really, it's not, I think this is too thick. I'm going to add a little shim to this narrow part so that it will be a perpendicular cut up here. Probably should have measured that, and I think I will, so I'll know how thick to make the shim. Alright, back here at the back end where it's the widest is about like so. Up here where I'm going to put this shim, you can see how much room there is. So I need a shim that's half of that room, half of that thickness of that gap rather. And that's about what I've got. It's really close. It's quite close. Then I'll have a perpendicular cutting space and a flatness that I can work with. So that's how I'm having to adapt the shape of this stock to run it on a bandsaw after all this shaping's been done. Now, this was just a rough bandsaw cut, and there's a little daylight. You can see it if you put the light the right way here and there. And for a rough bandsaw cut, I'm very happy with that. I'm happy with the size of this pad and the shape, because there's very little to have to trim off on either one. The pad has to be trimmed off a little bit on the top sides. The stock has to be trimmed a teeny bit on the top. There's a little bit of wood showing up here, and it just fits very, very, very well for a mail order pad. The only thing I know, the only way I know to pad this thing, work on it, it's not going to scuff it at this point, is with the rag. Before I even start trying to fit and sand and grind, I'm going to go ahead and bore my holes. That way I can line this up in the same place. The screws that they sent with it are supposed to fit, but they look a little tiny bit big. I know I have to bore out the hole to get the thing in there, and then when I get it down in there, I can see if I actually have to relieve the countersink a little bit. That hole is just big enough for me to run that screw in with my fingers. But see how much too proud that screw is than the pad. See, that's just not down in there far enough. Redoing a countersink is not a super easy thing to do, because they tend to dig in and grab. So you got to really hold this thing down well before you start in to countersink it. If they grab, that is shot. And this is a cheap one. It's only like 20 bucks. It's a reproduction. So I've got to get a countersink. You know what? I've got a countersink right here. Usually I just use a drill bit. This one is an actual countersink tool. It's a better idea. Like Ford, you know? It's a better idea. Unless you own a Toyota. My drill press is a little messy right now. Sorry about that. You got to really hold this down. Now, a countersink tool doesn't grab like a drill bit. So, this is actually not near as dangerous as what I thought it might be, and explained to you that it might be. I'm just going to go down a little and then try it. The reason I'm having to unscrew this is the shank portion is smaller than the thread portion ever so slightly, and when I drilled this hole out, I didn't want to get it any bigger than I had to. Okay, that'll work. When you can get worms like that out of end grain, that's a very sharp drill bit. Since I don't have another practice screw with this same thread, I'm having to use these, and I always like to run my screws in there and cut my threads before I put my caps on, my pads. They go in easier second, third, and fourth time around than they do the first, and I don't take the chance of slipping, the screwdriver slipping off and landing on that pad and scratching it. And if it's going to do it, it'll probably do it on the first pass. That thing didn't splinter much at all. Of course, Turkish walnut is good about not splintering. Now, I'm not going to torque this down much. I want to see the imperfections. I want to see the light coming underneath there. I'm just going to snug it down. I want to move this plastic. I want to shine a light underneath it and look under there. But I have a high spot where it's touching right here at the screw, from about there to the end. I have a gap about right here. It just really just needs to be just evened up. Just slick it up. It really doesn't need a lot. There's a hump here and a little hump there, but they're very small. These screws should be identical. I mean, they should be. They mass produce these things. So I'm not really worried about keeping the top and the bottom exactly in the top and bottom.